Desperate after losing all his money and being kicked out of his own company, a former billionaire bumps into a homeless boy at a traffic light. Hearing, "I know how to save your business," leaves him in complete shock. Jack Thompson stepped onto the cold sidewalk of the city's financial district, his once expensive suit now wrinkled and his tie loosened. Only an hour ago, he had been the CEO of one of the largest corporations in the area. Now he was out on the street, expelled from his own company by the very partners he had chosen himself. The traffic light turned red, and Jack stopped, staring blankly as cars zipped by. His world was collapsing around him, and he could barely process what had happened. Then a small voice cut through his thoughts. "Mister, can you spare some change?" Jack looked down and saw a boy of about 5, tousled hair and worn-out clothes, holding out his tiny hand. For a moment, Jack hesitated. Normally, he would have ignored panhandlers, but today he felt a strange connection to this scruffy child. "What's your name, kid?" Jack asked, his voice rough. "Tommy," the boy replied, smiling and revealing a missing front tooth. Jack fished around in his pockets and found a few coins. As he placed them in Tommy's hand, the boy surprised him. "I know how to save your business." Jack froze. "What?" Tommy looked around and motioned for Jack to lean down. Intrigued and more than a little desperate, Jack bent closer. "I hear things," Tommy whispered. "People in suits talk a lot when they think no one's paying attention." Jack felt his heart rate spike. "What kind of things?" "Stuff about hidden money and fake papers," Tommy said, his eyes shining with the importance of the secret. "And about a man named Jack they wanted out of the way." Jack's blood ran cold. How could this homeless boy know about the inner workings of his own company? He glanced around, half expecting hidden cameras or his former partners mocking him somewhere nearby. "Tommy, where did you hear this?" Jack asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Right here," Tommy pointed at the traffic light. "The guys in suits stop here every day. They talk on the phone or to each other. They think no one's listening, but I hear everything." Jack hesitated. Part of him wanted to walk away, go home and drown himself in expensive whiskey. But another part, the part that had made him a successful CEO, sensed an opportunity. "Tommy, can you tell me more? It's really important." The boy nodded eagerly, as though about to share a thrilling secret. "There's a man they call Bill. He's always talking about big numbers and accounts in weird places." Jack felt a chill. William Hartley, his former CFO, known for his creativity with numbers and for his shady connections. "And there's another one," Tommy went on. "They call the boss, and he seems to be in charge of everyone. Charles Dumont, the chairman of the board. Jack had always been suspicious of him, but never had any solid proof." "Tommy, this is incredible," Jack murmured, his mind racing with possibilities. "But it's also very dangerous." "You shouldn't be eavesdropping on this stuff," the boy shrugged. "Nobody really notices me anyway. It's easy to listen." Jack looked around, suddenly aware they were far too exposed. Anyone could see them talking, and the last thing he needed was to draw attention to Tommy. "Listen, Tommy," Jack said, crouching to the boy's level. "What you've told me is really important. It could help a lot of people, but we have to be careful, you understand?" Tommy nodded, his wide eyes serious. "Do you come here every day?" Jack asked. "Almost every day," Tommy replied, "except when it rains a lot. Then my mom won't let me." Jack thought quickly. He needed more information but couldn't risk the boy's safety. "Tommy, I want you to keep doing what you normally do here. But don't try to listen more than usual, okay? Just act natural. I'll come back in a few days and we'll talk again." "Like a secret job?" Tommy asked, eyes gleaming with excitement. Jack couldn't help a small smile. "Something like that, but it's very serious, Tommy. You can't tell anyone. Not even your mom for now. It could be dangerous." The boy made a zipper motion over his lips. "My lips are sealed." Jack straightened up, feeling oddly energized. An hour ago, he thought his world had ended. Now, he had a glimmer of hope. "Here," Jack said, pulling out a $20 bill from his wallet. "This is for your work today." Use it wisely, okay? Tommy's eyes went wide at the sight of the bill. Wow, thanks, sir. Call me Jack, he said, feeling uncomfortable with the formality. Thanks, Jack, Tommy corrected himself, tucking the bill carefully into his pocket. The traffic light turned green and the crowd began to move. Jack knew he had to leave before anyone noticed his lengthy conversation with a boy at the traffic light. Remember, Tommy, our secret, I'll be back in a few days. Tommy nodded solemnly, then his face broke into a wide grin. Bye, Jack. See you next time. Jack merged into the crowd, his heart pounding. As he walked, his mind spun with possibilities. Tommy's information was fragmented, but it was a start he desperately needed. Reaching the corner, Jack looked back. Tommy was already busy asking other passers-by for change, appearing to be just another homeless kid. But Jack knew he was so much more than that. Tommy was his key to uncovering the corruption in his company, a chance at redemption. Jack pulled out his phone and hesitated. He had contacts in the police and reporters who trusted him. But it was too early. He needed more. He needed to build a solid case before making any moves. Pocketing his phone, Jack decided to head home. He had a lot to think about, a lot to plan. And in a few days, he would return to that traffic light, hoping Tommy might have more pieces to the puzzle. As he walked through the bustling streets of the financial district, Jack felt different. That morning, he'd been a powerful CEO. By afternoon, a defeated man. Now, as night fell, he was a man on a mission, an unlikely one, based on the words of a homeless boy. But it was all he had. Jack looked up at the skyscrapers around him, at the lit-up offices where executives were still working. In one of those buildings, his former partners were likely celebrating his downfall. They thought they had won. But Jack Thompson was not a man who gave up easily, and with the unexpected help of a small ally, he was ready to fight. The day had started with him losing everything. It ended with him finding a spark of hope in the most improbable place, and that, Jack thought, could make all the difference. 3 days had passed since Jack's encounter with Tommy at the traffic light, 3 days of planning, doubts, and growing determination. When Jack returned to the financial district, the sky was overcast, threatening rain. He spotted Tommy in the same spot, his tousled hair and worn clothes looking even more ragged under the grey sky. The boy smiled when he saw Jack, a smile that made Jack feel a pang of guilt. Was it really right to involve a child in this? Hi, Jack, Tommy greeted brightly. Hello, Tommy, Jack replied, trying to appear casual. How's everything? Tommy glanced around before answering, imitating spy gestures he had probably seen in movies. I've got news, he whispered. Jack crouched down, pretending to tie his shoe. Tell me. This man Bill talked about a big meeting. Something about closing the deal and getting rid of the evidence. Jack's heart pounded. This could be the break he'd been waiting for. When? Tommy, did you hear any date? Tommy scrunched his face, thinking hard. I think Friday. They talked about celebrating over the weekend. Jack nodded, his mind already racing ahead. Then he noticed a bruise on Tommy's arm. What happened to your arm? The boy pulled down his sleeve, trying to hide it. It's nothing. A wave of concern washed over Jack. Tommy, did someone hurt you? Is it because of what we're doing? No, Tommy replied quickly. It was just an accident at home. The hesitation in the boy's voice made Jack frown. There was more to this story, and he needed to find out what... Tommy, where do you live? I think it's time I meet your mother. The boy seemed nervous. I don't know if Mom will like that. It's important, Jack insisted gently. I need to explain to her what we're doing. It's the right thing to do. After a moment's hesitation, Tommy agreed. Okay, it's not far from here. They walked a few blocks, with Tommy leading the way. Jack noticed how the neighborhood changed quickly. Towering buildings gave way to older, more run-down structures. They stopped in front of a red brick apartment building, its paint peeling and its entry dimly lit. Tommy led Jack to the 3rd floor, stopping at a door with a crooked 302 nailed to it. Mom, Tommy called, knocking on the door. "I'm home. And I brought a friend." The door opened, revealing a young woman with deep circles under her eyes and her hair tied back in a messy ponytail. Her eyes widened at the sight of Jack, and she pulled Tommy inside. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice a mix of fear and defiance. "Sarah, I presume?" Jack said, attempting to sound as calm as possible. "My name is Jack Thompson." "Well, I met Tommy at the traffic light a few days ago." Sarah's face hardened. "What do you want with my son?" Jack realized how delicate the situation was. He took a deep breath before continuing. "Mrs. Miller, may I come in? I have something important to discuss with you." Sarah hesitated, looking from Jack to Tommy. Finally, she opened the door wider. 5 minutes. The apartment was small and modest, but clean. A worn sofa, a scratched coffee table, and an old TV occupied the cramped living room. Jack noticed a few of Tommy's toys scattered on the floor. "Tommy, go to your room," Sarah instructed. The boy obeyed, casting a worried glance at Jack before leaving. Sarah turned to Jack, arms folded. "Talk." Jack decided honesty was the best approach. "Mrs. Miller, until a few days ago, I was the CEO of Thompson Enterprises." Recognition flashed in Sarah's eyes, followed by a wave of anger. "Thompson, my husband worked for you. He was a janitor. He died 2 years ago, and we never received any kind of support from your company." The revelation hit Jack like a punch. I didn't know. I'm sorry." "Of course you didn't know," Sarah retorted bitterly. "People like you don't see people like us." Jack felt the weight of guilt. How many other invisible people had suffered from his negligence? "What happened to your husband?" he asked softly. Sarah looked away. "An accident at work. At least, that's what they told us. But John, he'd been on edge for weeks. He said he saw strange things during his night shifts." A chill ran down Jack's spine. "What kind of things?" "I'm not sure. He didn't want to worry me, but he talked about doing the right thing, about exposing something big." The pieces began to fit together in Jack's mind. "Sarah, I was forced out of my company days ago. I think it's because I was getting close to uncovering some internal wrongdoing. And your son, Tommy, might have crucial information." Sarah turned pale. "What does Tommy have to do with this?" Jack explained about the executives talking near the traffic light, about the information Tommy had overheard. With every word, Sarah's face shifted between fear and outrage. "So you're using my son as an informant?" she asked, incredulous. "That wasn't my intention," Jack defended himself. "But the situation developed, and, Sarah, this could be bigger than we realize. If what Tommy heard is true, and if it connects to what happened to your husband, we might be dealing with a massive corruption scheme." Sarah got up, pacing the small living room. "And what do you propose? That I put my son at risk?" "No," Jack replied firmly. "I want to protect Tommy and help you. If we can expose this scheme, I can make sure you both are well compensated, enough to leave this place, to give Tommy a better life." Sarah regarded him for a long moment. "Why should we trust you?" Jack met her gaze. "Because I was wrong, Sarah. I was wrong not to see people like you and your husband, not to question what was happening behind the scenes in my own company. This is my chance to make it right, and maybe your chance to get justice." The silence that followed was heavy. Sarah seemed to be fighting an internal battle. "Mom," Tommy's voice came from the hallway. "Is everything okay?" Sarah closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, there was a new determination in them. "Tommy, come here." The boy entered the room timidly, glancing between his mother and Jack. "Tommy," Sarah said softly, "I want you to tell me everything you heard at the traffic light." "Everything." As Tommy spoke, Jack watched Sarah's face. He saw fear, pride, and finally resolve. When Tommy finished, Sarah turned to Jack. "If we're going to do this, we do it my way. Tommy won't go to that traffic light alone anymore. You want information? I go with him. And at the first sign of danger, it's over. Understand?" Jack nodded, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. Understood. And Mr. Thompson, Sarah added, her voice firm, if this somehow helps clarify what happened to my husband, I expect you to use every bit of your power and influence to make sure justice is served. You have my word, Jack promised. As he prepared to leave, Jack looked at Tommy and Sarah. An unlikely alliance was forming, born of pain, necessity, and a faint hope for justice. I'll see you tomorrow, Jack said. We have a lot of work to do. Stepping out of the apartment, Jack knew his life had changed irreversibly. The road ahead would be dangerous, but for the first time in days, he felt he was doing the right thing. The sky was still overcast as Jack left the building, but now a thin ray of sunlight broke through the clouds, perhaps a sign that the truth, however difficult, was finally coming to light. Jack woke up early, his mind already churning with thoughts about the next steps in his investigation. He had spent the last few days planning carefully how to move forward without drawing suspicion. Now it was time to act. He met Tommy at the nearby park, close to the traffic light where it had all begun. The boy arrived, skipping along with eyes bright with excitement. "Remember our deal, Tommy?" Jack asked, crouching to the boy's eye level. Tommy nodded eagerly. "Yeah. Act normal, hear everything, and then tell you later." Jack smiled, admiring the child's enthusiasm. "Exactly. And remember, if anyone asks, you've never seen me, okay?" "Got it, boss," Tommy saluted, making Jack chuckle softly. While Tommy took his usual spot near the traffic light, Jack blended into the crowd of executives and employees going in and out of the corporate buildings. Using a small concealed earpiece, he could pick up fragments of conversations around Tommy. The first few hours were frustrating, mostly traffic noise, trivial chatter about the weather, mundane meeting details. But then, near noon, Jack heard something that made his heart race. "We need to move more funds before the audit," said a voice Jack recognized as William Hartley, his ex-CFO. "I'm on it," replied another voice. "The accounts in the Cayman Islands are ready to receive." Jack felt a surge of both vindication and anger. His suspicions were right, but the extent of the corruption was bigger than he had imagined. At the end of the day, Jack met up with Tommy again in a quiet cafe. "So, detective, what did you find out?" Jack asked, trying to keep his tone light. Tommy leaned across the table, speaking in a dramatic whisper. "The bald guy was talking about some accounts in a place called Cayman." "What's Cayman, Jack?" Jack briefly explained tax havens, simplifying so Tommy could understand. The boy took in every word, making Jack wonder if he was involving the child in something far too dangerous. In the days that followed, Jack used his remaining contacts to investigate further. An old colleague in the finance department, who had always been wary of the company's practices, provided Jack with copies of suspicious internal reports. "Be careful, Jack," the colleague warned. "This goes deeper than you think." Parallel to the investigation, Jack didn't forget his promise to help Tommy's family. Using his connections, he arranged a job interview for Sarah at a smaller but reputable company. When he told Sarah about the opportunity, her reaction was a mix of gratitude and skepticism. "Why are you doing this, Mr. Thompson?" she asked, narrowing her eyes. Jack hesitated, searching for the right words. "Because it's the right thing to do. And because I want to correct my past mistakes." Sarah didn't look entirely convinced, but she accepted the offer. "Don't think this changes anything between us. I still don't fully trust you." Jack nodded, understanding her hesitation. As days went by, Jack started noticing small changes in Sarah and Tommy's life. With the new job, Sarah seemed less stressed. Tommy had new clothes and even mentioned joining a soccer league after school. One afternoon, while waiting for Tommy at the park, Jack saw the boy running toward him, a huge smile on his face. "Jack! Jack! Look!" Tommy exclaimed, showing off a new pair of sneakers. "Mom got them for me, and she said we might move into a bigger apartment soon." Jack felt a wave of emotion. Seeing Tommy so happy, and knowing he had played a part in that, brought him a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in a long time. However, The investigation continued, and each new discovery worried Jack more. He uncovered a pattern of suspicious transactions, all leading to offshore accounts in multiple tax havens. Millions of dollars had been siphoned off over the years, funneled through a complex network of shell companies. One night, going through the documents he had gathered, Jack came across something that made his blood run cold. John Miller's name, the late father of Tommy, appeared in a report dated just days before his death. Employee J. Ames displayed excessive curiosity. "Situation requires immediate attention," read a coded note at the bottom of the document. Jack felt the weight of guilt and responsibility bearing down on him. It wasn't just about regaining his company or clearing his name. It was about justice for John Miller and keeping Tommy and Sarah safe. Determined to see this through, Jack set up a meeting with Marcus Reeves, a trusted investigative journalist. They met in a quiet bar, far from the prying eyes of the financial district. "What you have is explosive, Jack," Marcus said, after hearing Jack's summary of findings. "But we need undeniable proof, something they can't deny or cover up." Jack nodded, thoughtful. "I know, and I think I know where to find it, but it's going to be risky." As they discussed next steps, Jack couldn't stop thinking about Tommy and Sarah. He was about to stir up a hornet's nest, and the consequences could be severe. The next day, when Jack met Tommy at the park, he noticed the boy was acting differently. Tommy seemed nervous, constantly looking over his shoulder. "What's wrong, Tommy? Did something happen?" Jack asked, concerned. Tommy hesitated before answering. "Jack, I think someone's following me. A man in a black suit. He was watching me at the traffic light yesterday and today." Jack's heart raced. Had they been discovered? Was Tommy's safety now compromised? In that moment, Jack realized the investigation had reached a new level of danger. He needed to move fast, not just to expose the truth, but to protect Tommy and Sarah. As he walked back home, planning his next moves, Jack knew he was about to cross a point of no return. The truth was within his grasp, but the price might be far too high. Jack spent a sleepless night poring over old company files and documents. His once pristine living room now resembled a battlefield of papers. As dawn began to break, he found something. It was an old report, dated 2 years earlier. Most of it was standard corporate paperwork, but one paragraph stood out. Incident 267. Night shift janitor reported suspicious activity on the 15th floor. Internal investigation found no evidence. Case closed. Jack frowned. The 15th floor housed the executive offices, including his own. He didn't recall ever hearing about any incident at the time. That afternoon, he met Tommy at their usual park. The boy looked less cheerful than usual. "Everything okay, Tommy?" Jack asked, concerned. Tommy shrugged. "I've just been thinking about my dad. Today makes 2 years since he, you know." Jack felt a lump in his throat. "I'm sorry, Tommy. Your dad worked at the company, right?" "Yeah, he was a janitor. He worked at night." Something clicked in Jack's mind. "Tommy, did your dad ever mention seeing anything strange at work?" The boy's eyes widened. "How do you know?" Jack tried to stay calm, though his heart was racing. "Just a guess. What did he say?" Tommy looked around, as if about to share a huge secret. "Dad used to take notes. He said he saw weird things at night but couldn't tell anyone. He said one day he'd show me hash when I was older." Jack could barely contain his excitement. "Tommy, those notes, do you know where they are?" The boy shook his head. "I think Mom stored his stuff in a box after he, you know." Jack knew he had to see those notes, but convincing Sarah wouldn't be easy. He hesitated before asking his next question. "Tommy, do you think your mom would let me look at them?" The boy seemed uncertain. "I don't know. She doesn't like to talk about Dad." Jack nodded, understanding. "I get it, but it's really important. Could you ask her?" Tommy agreed, though he looked apprehensive. 2 days later, Jack stood in front of Sarah and Tommy's apartment door. His palms were sweaty, and he had rehearsed what to say 1,000 times. Sarah opened the door, her face a mask of caution. "Mr. Thompson," she said curtly. "Sarah, thank you for seeing me," Jack replied, trying to sound as sincere as possible. "I know this is hard for you." She stepped aside, allowing him to enter. The apartment was small but neat and welcoming. Tommy sat on the sofa, looking nervous. "Tommy told me you want to see John's things," Sarah said, getting straight to the point. "Why?" Jack took a deep breath. "Sarah, I came across some irregularities at the company. Things that happened 2 years ago. I believe John might have seen something important." Sarah folded her arms, her gaze hard. "Are you suggesting his death wasn't an accident?" The question hung in the air, loaded with heavy implications. Jack chose his words carefully. "I'm suggesting that John may have been more observant than people realized, and that his observations could be crucial to understanding what's happening now." Sarah was silent for a long moment. Tommy looked from his mother to Jack, clearly tense. Finally, Sarah spoke. "I'm not sure I trust you, Mr. Thompson, but I trust my son, and Tommy seems to believe you want to help." She walked to a closet in the corner of the room and, after a few seconds of hesitation, pulled out a small cardboard box. She set it on the coffee table. "These are John's things. I never had the courage to go through them. Maybe you'll find something that makes sense." Jack approached the box reverently. He knew he was about to delve into the memories of a man who, in some way, stood at the center of all this. He began sorting through the contents: family photos, an old watch, some letters. At the bottom of the box, he found a small, battered black notebook. With trembling hands, Jack opened it. The pages were filled with cramped handwriting, dates, times, names, seemingly random numbers. "My God," Jack murmured. Sarah and Tommy edged closer, curious. Jack started reading aloud. "March 23rd, 2:15 a.m. Hartley and unknown man in CEO's office. Mentioned transfer and offshore." Seemed tense. Sarah gasped. "John never told me any of this," Jack continued. The notes grew more frequent and detailed in the final pages. The last entry made his blood run cold. "April 17th. Think they saw me. Hartley looked nervous. Need to tell someone. Tomorrow, I'll talk to HR." Sarah covered her mouth with her hand. That was the night before he..." Silence crashed down, overwhelming in its implications. Tommy, who had been quiet, spoke with a trembling voice. "They hurt my dad, didn't they?" Jack felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He looked at Sarah, seeing tears welling in her eyes. "Sarah, Tommy," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion, "I promise you both, I will find the truth, no matter the cost." Sarah stared at him, years of pent-up grief and anger burning in her eyes. "And then, what happens when you find the truth?" Jack didn't hesitate. "Justice. For John, for you, for everyone who was hurt by this corruption." Tommy approached, taking his mother's hand. "We can trust him, Mom. He wants to help, like Dad wanted." Sarah looked at her son, then at Jack, and finally at the notebook in his hands. She took a deep breath as though making the hardest decision of her life. "All right, Mr. Thompson, let's do it." "For John's memory." Jack nodded solemnly. He knew he was about to wade into dangerous waters, but now he had an even greater purpose. It wasn't just about saving his business or clearing his name. It was about honoring the memory of a man who'd had the courage to do the right thing and protecting the family he left behind. As he carefully packed the notebook, Jack made a silent promise to John Miller. His death would not be in vain. The truth would come out, no matter the cost. The past had resurfaced, bringing with it long-buried secrets. Now, the future depended on what they would do with these revelations. Jack knew the road ahead would be perilous, but looking at Tommy and Sarah, he found the strength to press on. The fight for truth and justice was only beginning. Jack parked his car in front of Sarah and Tommy's building, feeling a mix of anxiety and resolve. After days of careful negotiation, Sarah had finally agreed to let him examine John's belongings. Climbing the stairs, Jack found Tommy waiting anxiously in the hallway. "She's nervous," the boy whispered, pointing at the door, "but she said you can come in." Jack nodded, taking a deep breath before knocking. Sarah opened the door, her face tense with apprehension. "Mr. Thompson," she greeted him coldly. "Sarah, thank you for letting me in," Jack replied, stepping into the small apartment. The living room was meticulously tidy, but Jack could sense the tension in the air. In the center of the coffee table lay a worn-out cardboard box. "Those are John's things," Sarah explained, her voice trembling slightly. "I never had the heart to really look through them after—" She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Jack understood the weight of the moment. "Shall we begin?" he asked gently. Sarah nodded, taking a seat on the sofa. Tommy, unable to contain his curiosity, joined them. Jack opened the box carefully, as if handling sacred relics. In a sense, they were. Old photos, yellowed receipts, a stopped wristwatch, each item telling a piece of John Miller's story. It was Tommy who found it. "Look, Jack," the boy exclaimed, pulling something from the bottom of the box. It was a black notebook, the cover worn from use, the page edges slightly frayed. Jack took it, hands trembling, feeling he was on the verge of uncovering a crucial mystery. Opening it, he saw John Miller's cramped handwriting, dates, times, seemingly random observations. Jack began reading aloud. "March 12th, 11:45 p.m. Hartley and unidentified man in the CEO's office. Spoke quietly, but I heard offshore and clean-up records." Sarah gasped, covering her mouth. Jack continued. "March 17th, 1:30 a.m. Strange activity on the 15th floor. Saw Dumont leaving with a folder. Looked nervous." As Jack read on, a grim pattern emerged. During his night shifts, John Miller had inadvertently become a witness to a web of corruption and corporate crimes. April 3rd, 12:20 a.m. Found a torn document in Hartley's trash. Pieces mentioned Cayman accounts and funds diversion. Jack felt a chill run down his spine. He knew William Hartley and Charles Dumont. He had worked with them for years, trusted them. And all this time, they were orchestrating a criminal scheme right under his nose. Sarah, who had been silent, spoke with a trembling voice. "He never told me any of this." Tommy, grasping the seriousness, hugged his mother. Jack continued reading, each entry revealing more details about the scheme. Suspicious transfers, secret late-night meetings, documents destroyed in the dead of night. The final entry made Jack's blood run cold. April 15th, 2:15 a.m. I think Hartley saw me. I need to tell someone. Tomorrow I'm talking to HR or the police. Can't stay silent anymore. Sarah sobbed quietly. That was 2 days before the accident. The silence that followed felt suffocating. Jack looked at Sarah and Tommy, seeing their pain and the dawning realization of what had likely happened. "Sarah," Jack began carefully, "do you think John's death could have been—" "It wasn't an accident," Sarah finished, her voice firm despite her tears. "I always suspected, but I had no proof. Now," Tommy, his voice small but resolute, said, "they hurt my dad because he knew too much." The innocence of the question stood in stark contrast to its gravity. Jack felt the burden settle on him heavily. "Tommy, Sarah," he said, voice quavering with emotion, "I promise I'll see this through. I'll reveal the truth and get justice for John." Sarah locked eyes with him, years of bottled-up pain and anger shining through. "And how do you plan to do that, Mr. Thompson? These men are powerful. They killed John." Jack knew she was right. They were dealing with dangerous people who would do anything to protect their secrets. "I have contacts," he explained. "Journalists, lawyers, I trust. With these notes and the evidence I've already gathered, we can build a strong case." "What about our safety?" Sarah asked, pulling Tommy closer protectively. Jack hesitated. He couldn't guarantee their safety completely, but ignoring this was impossible. "I'll do everything I can to protect you," he promised, But, Sarah, Tommy, you have to understand, what we have here is explosive. It can bring down powerful people, expose massive crimes. Tommy, again surprising them with his maturity, spoke, "We have to do it, Mom. For Dad. He wanted to tell the truth, right?" Sarah looked at her son, then at Jack, and finally at the notebook in Jack's hands. She took a deep, shuddering breath, as though facing the hardest decision of her life. "All right, Mr. Thompson, let's do it, for John and for justice." Jack nodded, feeling both relief and trepidation. "We'll need to be extremely careful. We've already seen what they're capable of." As he prepared to leave, promising to return the next day to plan their next steps, Jack looked once more at Sarah and Tommy. He saw fear in their eyes. Yes, but also determination. The past had resurfaced, revealing shocking truths. Now the future hinged on what they did with that knowledge. Jack knew the road ahead would be perilous and difficult, but as he looked at John Miller's family, he found the strength to carry on. The fight for truth and justice was only beginning, and Jack was determined to see it through, no matter the cost. Sarah's apartment had become a makeshift command center. Jack, Tommy's, and Sarah spent hours poring over John's notebook, analyzing every detail, every seemingly insignificant observation. Jack spread documents on the coffee table, financial reports, newspaper clippings, and his own notes. Tommy, fascinated by the process, helped by placing sticky notes and connecting information with colorful strings, like he had seen in detective movies. "Look, Jack," Tommy exclaimed, pointing to an entry in the notebook. "Dad wrote about a meeting on April 7th. Isn't that the same date as that strange report you found?" Jack took the notebook, impressed by the boy's sharp eye. "You're right, Tommy. Good catch." Sarah, who had been silent for a while, spoke in a trembling voice. "John was so anxious back then, restless, nervous. He kept talking about doing the right thing, but never told me exactly what was going on." Jack looked at her with a mix of compassion and guilt. "Sarah, do you remember anything else?" "Any detail could be important." Sarah closed her eyes, concentrating. He mentioned names a few times. Hartley, I clearly remember. And another one, Dumont, I think." Jack felt a shiver run down his spine. William Hartley and Charles Dumont were two of the partners who had ousted him from the company. The puzzle pieces were falling into place in a very unsettling way. "Mom," Tommy asked, his voice small and hesitant, "do you think Dad found out something he wasn't supposed to?" A heavy silence followed. Sarah pulled her son closer, tears silently coursing down her cheeks. Jack drew a deep breath, knowing what he had to say next would change everything. "Sarah, Tommy, I think we have to face the possibility that John's death wasn't an accident." The words hung in the air, laden with terrible implications. Sarah sobbed, hugging Tommy more tightly. "I always feared it," she whispered, "but I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want it to be true." Jack stepped closer, placing a reassuring hand on Sarah's shoulder. "I know it's hard, but we have to follow these clues. For John, for justice." Tommy, once again showing unexpected maturity, said, "If someone hurt my dad, we have to make them pay, right?" Jack nodded solemnly. "Yes, Tommy, but we have to be very careful. The people involved here are powerful and dangerous." Turning back to the notes, Jack started mapping out a pattern. John's observations painted a picture of a deeply corrupt operation, suspicious money transfers to offshore accounts, secret meetings after office hours, documents being destroyed. "Look at this." Jack pointed to an entry dated 2 weeks before John's death. "He mentions a major transfer to a Cayman Islands account. It lines up with some documents I found in the company files." Sarah frowned. "What does that mean?" Jack shook his head. "We're likely dealing with tax evasion, maybe even money laundering. It's more serious than I thought." Tommy, who had been connecting information with his colored strings, exclaimed, "Jack, look, all these red strings lead to Mr. Hartley's name." Jack examined the boy's handiwork, impressed. Tommy had inadvertently mapped out the scheme's main connections. William Hartley was at the center of it all. "Amazing job, Tommy," Jack praised, ruffling the boy's hair. You'd make a great detective." Sarah, watching this scene, seemed torn between pride and fear. "Jack, what do we do now? This is bigger than we imagined." Jack nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility. "We have to be extremely careful from now on. These people didn't hesitate to—" "Silence, John. We can't underestimate them." "But we're going to expose them, right?" Tommy asked, eyes shining with a mix of hope and resolve. "Yes, Tommy, we are," Jack promised. "But first, we need a rock-solid case, something they can't deny or cover up." Sarah stood and walked to the window, gazing outside for a moment. When she turned back, there was a new determination in her eyes. "John wanted to do the right thing," she said, her voice firm despite the tears. "He risked everything for it. We can't let that be in vain." Jack felt a surge of admiration for Sarah. Despite her fear and pain, she was willing to continue the fight her husband had started. "You're right," Jack agreed. "But from now on, we have to be even more careful. No talking about this outside this apartment. No suspicious texts or calls. And Tommy," he looked at the boy, "you need to act normal at school and with your friends. No talking about our investigation." "Okay," Tommy gave an exaggerated salute. "Got it, boss." Despite the gravity of the situation, they all laughed, easing the tension slightly. Jack began gathering the documents, organizing them meticulously. "I'll take these to a safe place. Tomorrow, I'll meet with a journalist I trust. He can help us figure out the next move." As he prepared to leave, Jack looked at Sarah and Tommy. In their eyes, he saw fear, yes, but also bravery and determination. They had become more than allies in this investigation. They were a team, bonded by the pursuit of truth and justice. "Stay safe," Jack said on his way out. "We'll talk soon." Walking into the night, Jack felt the weight of the files in his briefcase. Within those papers lay the proof of a conspiracy far worse than he had suspected. A conspiracy that had already claimed one life and endangered countless others. Jack knew he was about to face the most dangerous days of his life. But looking back at the lit window of Sarah and Tommy's apartment, he found the strength to carry on. The truth had to come out, no matter the cost. For John's memory, for Sarah and Tommy's safety, and for everyone else who had been victims of this corrupt web, Jack was determined to see this through. The dangerous connections had been revealed. Now, it was time to dismantle them, one by one. The following morning, Jack woke with renewed resolve. The revelations in John's notebook still rang in his mind, driving him forward. He knew every minute counted. The longer he waited, the more difficult it would be to find concrete evidence. Jack met Tommy at the park near their apartment. The boy seemed eager, as though about to embark on a grand adventure. "Ready to be my detective assistant today, Tommy?" Jack asked with a grin. Tommy nodded vigorously. "Yeah, where are we going first?" Jack pulled a copy of John's notes from his pocket. "Your dad mentioned some specific places. Let's start with the company's underground parking garage." They headed to the Thompson Enterprises building. Jack felt a pang of unease as he spotted the company logo he once took pride in. They entered the garage quietly, pretending to look for a car. "What exactly are we looking for, Jack?" Tommy whispered, his eyes wide. "Anything out of the ordinary," Jack replied softly. "Your dad mentioned a white van that showed up every Thursday night." They searched the garage, trying not to draw attention. It was Tommy who found it first. "Jack, look." He pointed to a dark corner. There stood a white van with no markings, covered in a thin layer of dust. Jack approached cautiously. Through the dusty windows, he could see boxes stacked inside. "Good job, Tommy," he murmured, discreetly snapping some photos with his phone. They exited the garage without incident, Jack's heart pounding. That van might be a key to uncovering more of the mystery. Meanwhile, Sarah had decided to conduct her own investigation. Though initially reluctant to get involved, she now felt an urgent need to uncover the truth about her husband's death. She went to a park John used to frequent on weekends with Tommy. In his notes, John had mentioned seeing executives meeting there, away from prying eyes. Sitting on a bench, pretending to read a book, Sarah kept watch. After nearly 2 hours, she saw something that made her heart skip a beat. William Hartley, the ex-CFO Jack had mentioned, entered the park. He looked uneasy, glancing over his shoulder constantly. Sarah watched as he met with a man she didn't recognize. They talked briefly, exchanged an envelope, and parted ways quickly. With trembling hands, Sarah managed to snap a few discreet photos on her phone. That evening, all three met again at Sarah's apartment. Jack was impressed by her initiative. "Sarah, this is incredible," he said, examining the photos she'd taken. "You caught Hartley red-handed, probably making an illicit exchange." Sarah nodded, a mix of pride and sadness in her eyes. "I had to do something. For John." Tommy, excited by the day's discoveries, spread out a city map on the table. "We can mark the places Dad mentioned, like a treasure map, but to catch bad guys." Jack smiled at the boy's enthusiasm. "Great idea, Tommy. Let's map out everything we know." As they worked on the map, Jack noticed how Sarah seemed more engaged, asking shrewd questions and offering insights about John's behavior in his final days. "He mentioned a restaurant," Sarah recalled suddenly. "The Lighthouse. He said it was where some executives had special meetings." Jack jotted it down. "That's great, Sarah. We'll check it out tomorrow." Over the following days, they intensified their search. Jack and Tommy discreetly visited the locations mentioned in John's notes, while Sarah used her observational skills to monitor suspicious activities around the company. At the Lighthouse, Jack posed as a customer and managed to overhear a suspect conversation between two company executives. They spoke in code but Jack caught references to offshore transfers and cleaning up records. Meanwhile, Tommy proved to be a sharp observer. During a visit to the company building with Jack, under the pretext that Jack was showing his nephew his old workplace, the boy noticed a pattern in the room numbers used for secret meetings. "Jack, look!" Tommy whispered, pointing to a string of numbers on a door. "They match those numbers Dad wrote in his notebook." Jack was astonished. What had seemed like random numbers in John's notes were actually codes for the rooms where illicit meetings were held. As they gathered more information, the puzzle came into focus. They discovered a complex network of corruption involving not only Thomson Enterprises executives, but also local politicians and even some judges. Sarah, initially hesitant, was now fully committed to the investigation. She spent hours analyzing documents, connecting dots Jack and Tommy might have missed. "It's like I'm finally understanding what John was going through," she said one night, tears in her eyes. "He must have felt so alone, carrying all this knowledge." Jack placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "He was a brave man, Sarah, and now we're continuing the work he started." Tommy, who was sticking new clues onto the map, looked up. "We're going to get justice for Dad, right?" "Yes, Tommy," Jack replied, voice firm. "We'll get justice for your dad and for everyone else who's been hurt by this corruption." As the night went on, the three continued working, united by a common goal. Jack sensed they were closing in on something big. The pieces were falling into place, revealing a picture of corruption that exceeded his worst fears. But with every new discovery came greater danger. Jack knew they had to be extremely cautious. The people behind this scheme had already proven they would stop at nothing to protect themselves. Glancing at Sarah and Tommy, Jack felt the weight of responsibility. He had to shield them, but he also needed their help to uncover the full truth. "Tomorrow," Jack said, closing the notebook, "we take the next big step. It's time to confront some people directly." Sarah and Tommy nodded, their faces a mix of fear and determination. Their search had intensified, and there was no turning back now. Whatever the future held, they would face it together, united by the pursuit of truth and justice. Jack walked through the streets near Thomson Enterprises, his former workplace. He was there to quietly observe the comings and goings of executives, hoping to catch any useful bit of information. What he didn't expect was to be recognized. "Mr. Thompson," a hesitant voice called out. Jack turned, tense and ready to deny his identity, but the face he saw was familiar. Michael Chen, a junior financial analyst he had hired shortly before being ousted. "Michael," Jack responded cautiously, scanning the area to ensure no one was watching. Michael looked nervous, his hands trembling slightly. "Mr. Thompson, I need to talk to you, not here, it's important." Jack hesitated. It could be a trap, but something in Michael's desperate eyes convinced him otherwise. "All right, there's a quiet cafe a couple of blocks from here. Meet me there in 15 minutes. At the cafe, Jack chose a table in the back, away from windows and potential eavesdroppers. Michael arrived a few minutes later, glancing nervously over his shoulder before sitting down. "Mr. Thompson, you have no idea what's happening inside the company," Michael began, his voice low and urgent. "Things have gotten worse since you left. The scheme, it's a lot bigger than anyone realizes." Jack leaned forward, heart pounding. "What scheme, Michael? What do you know?" Michael swallowed hard, clearly grappling with his conscience. "Large-scale fraud. It's not just tax evasion or embezzlement. They're manipulating data on a global scale, markets, even governments." Jack felt the weight of Michael's words. This was bigger than his darkest suspicions. "Do you have proof?" Michael nodded slowly. "I have access to some files." "I shouldn't, but, well, I'm good with computers. Mr. Thompson, this is huge, dangerously huge." Jack thought about John's notes, the work he, Sarah, and Tommy had done. The puzzle pieces were coming together in a terrifying way. "Why are you telling me this, Michael?" Jack asked, studying the young analyst. Michael hesitated. "Because it's wrong. And because, well, you were always fair with me. I figured if anyone could do something about this, it would be you." Jack thanked Michael, exchanged secure contact information with him, and told him to be extremely cautious. After the young man left, Jack sat alone, absorbing what he had just learned. Hours later, at his apartment, Jack shared the new information with Sarah and Tommy. Their reactions were immediate. "We should go to the police right now," Sarah exclaimed, her face pale with worry. Tommy, on the other hand, seemed excited. "No, not yet. We're so close to uncovering everything. If we tip off the authorities now, they might hide the evidence." Jack looked at them both, feeling the weight of the decision. "It's not that simple," he said calmly. "If what Michael said is true, this goes beyond the local police. We're talking about federal agencies, maybe even international." Sarah stood up, pacing nervously. "Jack, this is getting too dangerous. Think about Tommy. Think about what happened to John. We can't—" "Mom," Tommy interrupted, his voice surprisingly firm. "Dad wouldn't quit. He wanted to do the right thing, remember?" Sarah looked at her son, tears in her eyes. Jack could see the conflict on her face, the desire to protect Tommy clashing with the need to honor John's memory. Jack stood, placing a reassuring hand on Sarah's shoulder. "I understand your fear, Sarah. Believe me, I'm scared too. But Tommy's right. We're too close now to back down." Sarah took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "What if they find out? What if they come after us the way they came after John?" The question hung in the air, heavy with dread. Jack knew he couldn't make empty promises. "We'll take every precaution," he said firmly. "From now on, no discussions outside this apartment, no suspicious calls or messages. Tommy, you have to act even more normal at school. Sarah, it might be best if you take some days off from work." Tommy nodded solemnly, while Sarah looked like she wanted to protest but held back. "How much longer, Jack?" she asked, her voice tired. "How long until we have enough evidence?" Jack glanced at the map they had created, the connections they'd drawn. "With Michael's information, I think we're just days away from having a solid case, but we have to be meticulous. One mistake could cost us everything." They fell silent for a moment, each absorbed in the gravity of the situation. Tommy finally broke the silence. "We're a team, aren't we?" he asked, looking from Jack to his mother. "Like the Avengers. Everyone has a role. and together we're stronger." Despite the tension, Jack couldn't help smiling. "Yes, Tommy. We're a team." Sarah knelt beside her son, hugging him tight. "You're right, sweetheart. We're a team, and we'll do this together for your dad." Jack watched them, a mix of admiration and concern swelling inside him. He knew the next few days would be critical. With Michael's information, they had an edge, but also faced even greater risks. "Tomorrow," Jack said, his voice resolute, "we start piecing it all together. Michael gave us the key to connect the evidence we have. It's time to build a case nobody can ignore." Sarah and Tommy nodded, their faces reflecting fear and determination. Jack knew he was asking a lot of them, especially Tommy Kane, who was still so young. But he also knew they were his best hope of exposing the truth and finding justice. As they prepared for the night, each lost in their own thoughts, Jack couldn't help but think of John, the brave janitor who had taken the first step down this perilous road. Silently, Jack made a promise to John, to Sarah, to Tommy, and to himself. He would see this through, no matter the cost. The unexpected informant had changed the game. Now it was a race against time and against powerful forces willing to do anything to keep their secrets buried. But Jack was determined. With Sarah and Tommy by his side, he would face whatever came next. The truth was within reach, and they wouldn't stop until they brought it into the light. Sarah's apartment had become a full-fledged operations hub. Maps, documents, and notes covered every available surface. Jack, Sarah, and Tommy spent hours scrutinizing every detail, looking for that final link that would tie all the evidence together. It was on a rainy afternoon that Tommy made the crucial discovery. He was flipping through an old business newspaper, searching for mentions of Thompson Enterprises, when his eyes went wide. "Jack! Mom! Look at this!" he shouted, pointing to a small article in the business section. Jack leaned over the paper, reading aloud. "Thompson Enterprises in final negotiations to acquire Tech Future Inc. The deal, valued in the billions, is expected to close by the end of the month." Sarah frowned. "What does that have to do with our investigation?" Jack, however, was already connecting the dots. Tech Future, that name showed up in John's notes. And Michael mentioned something about global data manipulation. Tommy, excited by his discovery, ran to the map on the wall. "Look, Tech Future is here. Dad wrote about secret meetings near their building." Jack felt his heart hammering. "Sarah, do you recall John mentioning anything about a major acquisition before the accident?" Sarah closed her eyes, concentrating. He said something about the company getting a lot bigger, but I didn't understand at the time." Jack paced, his mind working overtime. "That's it, the missing piece. Tech Future is a cutting-edge tech company specializing in data analytics and AI. So what?" Tommy asked, puzzled. Jack knelt to look Tommy in the eye. "Think about it, Tommy. If Thompson Enterprises, with all its financial power, merges with a company that can manipulate data on a global scale." The boy's eyes widened as realization hit. They could control everything. Sarah turned pale. "My God, John must have found out about this. That's why." The silence that followed was laden with dark implications. Jack straightened, resolve in his eyes. "We have to move fast. If this deal closes, it might be too late to stop them." "But how do we prove anything?" Sarah asked. "All we have are suspicions and circumstantial evidence." Jack thought for a moment. "We need internal documents, contracts, emails, anything that shows their true intentions behind this acquisition." Tommy bounced excitedly. "How do we get them? Break in at night?" Jack couldn't help but smile at the boy's enthusiasm. "Not exactly, Tommy. But I have an idea." In the following days, Jack set his plan in motion. Using old contacts and a bit of social engineering, he managed to schedule a meeting at Thompson Enterprises under the pretense of consulting on post-acquisition restructuring. "It's risky," Sarah fretted, helping Jack prepare for the meeting. "What if they suspect something?" Jack adjusted his tie, trying to appear confident. "It's a risk we have to take. This might be our only shot. Tommy, watching with alert eyes, asked, "What exactly are you going to do there, Jack?" Jack knelt, placing his hands on the boy's shoulders. "I'm going to use my old access to get into the system. If we're lucky, I can copy some crucial files." On the morning of the meeting, Jack felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He knew he was risking everything: the investigation, his freedom, possibly Sarah and Tommy's safety. Entering the towering Thompson Enterprises building, Jack was hit by memories. Only months ago he had walked these halls as CEO. Now he was practically an intruder. The meeting with the executives was tense. Jack felt their wary gazes, especially that of William Hartley, his former CFO. But years of negotiation experience helped him maintain a calm, professional facade. "Thank you for the opportunity," Jack said at the end of the meeting. "May I use my old office for a few minutes to review some notes?" Hartley hesitated, but relented. "Of course, Jack. You know the way." The moment the office door closed behind him, Jack sprang into action. His fingers flew over the keyboard, accessing hidden folders and secure servers. Every second felt like an hour. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he found what he was looking for: secret contracts, incriminating emails, spreadsheets detailing the real purpose of the acquisition. He quickly copied everything onto a small storage device. He had just finished when he heard footsteps. Jack yanked the device free and slipped it into his pocket, right as the door opened. "Everything all right, Jack?" Hartley asked, sounding casual but looking alert. Jack forced a smile. "Yes, just finishing some notes. Thanks again for the opportunity." Leaving the building, Jack felt his heart pounding. He had succeeded. The missing piece was in his pocket. Back at Sarah's apartment, Jack was greeted by Tommy's excited hug and Sarah's anxious gaze. "Did you get it?" Tommy asked, practically bouncing. Jack nodded, pulling the storage device from his pocket. "I got it, and it's worse than we thought." For the next several hours, they pored over the documents. The plan was chilling in its ambition and reach. The acquisition of Tech Future was not just a business move. It was the centerpiece of a scheme to manipulate global markets, influence elections, and even control information flows worldwide. Sarah covered her mouth in horror. "My God, John must have uncovered some part of this. That's why—" Jack nodded grimly. Yes, he was a threat to them. A threat they couldn't allow. Tommy, unusually quiet, finally spoke. "What do we do now? Go to the police?" Jack exchanged a look with Sarah. "It's not that simple, Tommy. This goes beyond the local authorities. We have to think bigger." "FBI?" Sarah suggested. Jack shook his head. "Even bigger. We're dealing with an international conspiracy. We need someone who can handle this on a global scale." A pensive silence filled the room. Finally, Tommy offered a solution. "What if we tell everyone all at once?" the boy suggested. "Like, put it on the internet." Jack and Sarah exchanged glances, an idea beginning to form. "Not exactly the open internet," Jack said slowly. "But what if we use secure channels to send everything to investigative journalists around the world, all at the same time?" Sarah nodded, understanding. They wouldn't be able to silence it if the story breaks everywhere at once. Jack felt a surge of adrenaline. They had the final piece, and now they had a plan. "We have a lot of work to do," he said, looking at Sarah and Tommy. "And it'll be dangerous. Are you both sure you want to go through with this?" Sarah took Tommy's hand, then reached out to Jack. "We're in this together. For John, for justice, and for the future we want for Tommy." Tommy placed his hand over theirs. "We're a team, remember?" Till the end, Jack felt a rush of emotion. With the final piece in hand and loyal allies by his side, he knew they were about to change the world. "Then let's get started," he said, his voice filled with determination. "We have a truth to unveil and a future to protect." And so, in that small apartment, three unlikely heroes prepared to take on one of the biggest conspiracies in modern history, armed with the truth and united by a common purpose. Sarah's apartment was quiet with tension. Jack sat at the kitchen table, painstakingly reviewing every document, every note, every scrap of evidence they had gathered over the past months. The enormity of what they were about to do weighed heavily on him. Sarah came into the kitchen, 2 steaming mugs of coffee in hand. "How's it going?" she asked, placing one next to Jack. He sighed, rubbing his tired eyes. "We're almost there. I just need to make sure everything is in order, that we haven't left any loose ends." Tommy, who was sitting on the living room floor surrounded by papers and colored markers, called out excitedly, "Jack, come see what I did." Jack and Sarah exchanged curious glances before joining him. What they saw left them speechless. Tommy had created an elaborate diagram using colored strings to connect photos, documents, and sticky notes. It was a visual representation of the entire corruption scheme, so clear and intuitive that even a child could follow it. "Tommy, this is amazing," Jack murmured, studying the boy's work. Sarah knelt beside her son, tears in her eyes. "You did this all by yourself, honey?" Tommy nodded, proud. "I thought it would be easier to understand this way, like in detective movies." Jack felt a surge of admiration for the boy. "Tommy, you might have just made our case irrefutable. It's all right there, so obvious. Can we use it?" Tommy asked, eager to help. "Use it." "Tommy, this is going to be the centerpiece of our presentation," Jack replied, already envisioning how to incorporate Tommy's diagram into their plan. In the hours that followed, Jack worked tirelessly to digitize and refine Tommy's diagram, merging it with their other evidence. Sarah, overcoming her initial reluctance, threw herself into the process, offering key insights and helping organize the data. "Here," she said, pointing to a section of the diagram, "we can add John's notes about the late-night meetings. That directly connects to the emails you obtained, Jack." Jack nodded, impressed by her keen observation. "Great point. That makes the link between suspicious activities and the top executives even stronger." As night wore on, fatigue set in. Tommy, determined to stay helpful, struggled to keep his eyes open. Sarah gently ruffled Tommy's hair. "I think it's time someone went to bed." "But I want to help," Tommy protested, yawning. Jack knelt beside him. "Tommy, you've helped more than you can imagine. Your diagram is the heart of all this. Now I need you well rested for tomorrow. We have a big day ahead." Reluctantly, Tommy agreed to go to bed, but not before giving both Jack and his mom a tight hug. "We're going to catch the bad guys tomorrow, right?" "We sure are, champ," Jack answered, feeling a mixture of pride and unease. After Tommy went to his room, Jack and Sarah kept working in silence for a while. Finally, Sarah spoke. "Jack, do you really think we're doing the right thing?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Jack stopped what he was doing and looked into her eyes. "Honestly, I'm terrified. What we're about to do will shake the foundations of some of the world's most powerful institutions, but—" He paused, choosing his words. "If we don't do it, if we let this corruption continue, what kind of world are we leaving for Tommy?" Sarah nodded slowly, tears forming. "John would be proud of us, wouldn't he?" "I'm sure of it," Jack answered gently. "He gave his life trying to expose the truth. Now we're going to finish what he started." With renewed determination, they returned to their tasks. The hours flew by as they organized documents, refined presentations, and prepared data packages for different journalists and news outlets around the world. When the first rays of sunlight peeked through the curtains, Jack and Sarah finally leaned back, exhausted but satisfied. "It's done," Jack said, looking at the neat stacks of documents and data drives on the table. "Everything we gathered, all the evidence is here, ready to be unleashed to the world." Sarah took Jack's hand, squeezing it gently. "There's no going back now, is there?" Jack shook his head. "No. In a few hours, we'll send all of this out to our contacts. Once the information is out, we can't control what happens next." A contemplative silence settled over them, broken only by the soft sound of Tommy's breathing from the next room. Are you scared? Sarah asked quietly. Jack hesitated before answering truthfully. Yes, but I've never been more certain that we're doing the right thing. Sarah nodded, her expression hardening with resolve. Then let's do it, for John's memory, for Tommy's future, and for all the other people hurt by this corruption. In that moment, as the sun rose over the city, Jack felt a surge of emotion. Glancing at Sarah, at the room where Tommy slept, and at the fruits of their dangerous, tireless work spread out before them, he knew that no matter what happened next, they had done the right thing. Let's get some rest, Jack suggested. In a few hours, we change the world. And so, on the eve of the greatest revelation of their lives, Jack and Sarah allowed themselves a brief moment of respite, knowing that the day to come would change everything forever. The morning arrived grey and heavy, as if the very sky sensed the gravity of what was about to unfold. Jack, Sarah, and Tommy left the apartment in silence, each carrying meticulously organized pieces of evidence. On the way to the central precinct, Jack couldn't help noticing how Tommy looked both nervous and determined, his small fingers gripping the folder with his diagram. Sarah, on the other hand, wore a calm facade, though the tension in her posture gave her away. Upon arriving at the police station, they were greeted by Detective Marcus Reeves, an old acquaintance of Jack's from his days as CEO. "Jack," Marcus said in a grave tone, "I hope you've got something substantial for us." "Trust me, Marcus," Jack replied. "What we have here will change everything." Over the next 2 hours, in a secluded conference room, Jack presented each piece of evidence with painstaking detail. He began with John Miller's notes, explaining how the night shift janitor had accidentally uncovered a massive corruption scheme. "This man," Jack said, pointing to a photo of John, "paid with his life for his integrity." Sarah, seated beside Tommy, squeezed the boy's hand, tears rolling silently down her cheeks. Jack proceeded, describing the documents he had obtained, the intel from the internal whistleblower, and finally unveiling Tommy's diagram. "And this," he said, laying the large visual map on the table, "is what ties it all together." The officers leaned in, murmuring as they studied the diagram, clearly impressed by its clarity and scope. "Wait a minute," Detective Reeves interrupted, looking at Tommy. "You're telling me this kid—" Tommy stood, his voice trembling slightly but steady. "I overheard things, sir. At the traffic light, the suits talk like no one's listening, but I was—" A stunned silence followed. The boy's innocence contrasted sharply with the magnitude of the information he had helped uncover. The chief of police, who had been silent until then, finally spoke. "Mr. Thompson, this is extraordinary. The scale of this corruption, the way you've assembled the evidence, we need to act immediately." In the minutes that followed, the conference room turned into a command center. Orders were issued. Teams were mobilized. Jack, Sarah, and Tommy were instructed to remain at the station for their own safety. "No," Jack protested. "I need to be there. I know the layout, the people. I can help." After a short debate, it was decided that Jack would join the operation, while Sarah and Tommy stayed behind under police protection. "Stay safe," Sarah whispered, hugging Jack tight. "Get the bad guys, Jack," Tommy said, his eyes brimming with fear and admiration. Jack nodded solemnly to them both before following the officers. The police convoy arrived at Thompson Enterprises around lunchtime. Jack knew the board would be in the 30th floor conference room, finalizing details of the Tech Future acquisition. As they rode the elevator, Jack's heart pounded. Years of work, months of investigation, all leading to this moment. When the elevator doors opened, chaos erupted. Officers burst into the conference room, shouts of "Police, don't move!" echoing through the corridors. Jack followed closely behind, watching with a mix of satisfaction and sadness as his former colleagues and partners looked on in shock. William Hartley was the first to speak. "Jack, what the hell is going on here?" "What's going on, William?" Jack replied calmly. "Is that your scheme is over?" Charles Dumont, the board chairman, tried to keep composure. "This is outrageous. You have no right to barge into a private meeting. I demand to speak to my lawyers." Detective Reeves stepped forward, cuffing Dumont. "You'll have plenty of time to talk to your lawyers, sir. For now, you're under arrest for suspected fraud, tax evasion." Well, the list goes on. As executives were taken away one by one, Jack noticed a familiar figure attempting to slip out quietly. It was Michael Chen, the young analyst who had become their informant. "Michael!" Jack called, making the young man freeze. "That's all right. You did the right thing." Michael looked at Jack, a mix of relief and fear on his face. I wasn't sure you'd actually do anything. I thought maybe—" "You gave us the final piece we needed," Jack assured him. "Because of you, we could expose all of this." Just then, one of the arrested executives passed by, eyes widening when he saw Jack. "Wait a minute. The kid at the traffic light, was he your son?" Jack felt a surge of pride and protectiveness. "No, he wasn't my son. He was just a brave kid you completely underestimated." The executive paled, realizing how their careless conversations had led to their downfall. In the hours that followed, Thompson Enterprises became a crime scene. Computers were seized, files confiscated, and dozens of employees questioned. Jack watched the proceedings with mixed emotions. This had once been his empire, his creation. Seeing it collapse was painful, but he knew it had to happen. At the end of the day, exhausted but triumphant, Jack returned to the station. Sarah and Tommy awaited him anxiously. "So," Sarah asked, searching Jack's face for answers. Jack knelt down in front of Tommy. "Well, Detective Tommy, I'd say we got the bad guys." The boy's face lit up with a huge grin. He threw his arms around Jack, hugging him tightly. Sarah joined the hug, tears of relief and joy in her eyes. "Is it over?" "Really over?" Jack nodded, feeling the burden of the past months lifting from his shoulders. "The hard part is over. Now comes the legal process, the trials. But the truth is out. There's no going back now." As they left the station, a crowd of reporters awaited them. Flashbulbs went off. Shouted questions filled the air, but Jack kept Sarah and Tommy close, shielding them from the frenzy. "Mr. Thompson, is it true a child helped uncover the entire scheme? How do you feel seeing your former company collapse? Are there international implications to this case?" Jack raised a hand to quiet them. "We'll make a full statement soon. For now, all I can say is that the truth always finds a way, and sometimes that way comes from the most unexpected places." He glanced at Tommy, who stared back at the crowd with wide eyes. As they got into a police car headed to a safe location, Jack reflected on the incredible journey they'd been on. From a chance meeting at a traffic light to one of the most significant corporate corruption revelations in history. The trial date came and went, and justice was set in motion. Though the future was still uncertain, Jack knew that with Sarah and Tommy by his side, he could face whatever came next. The sky, which had been grey earlier, began to clear. A new era was dawning, not just for them, but for all those impacted by years of greed and corruption. And it was all thanks to the courage of one janitor, the sharp ear of a young boy, and the determination of a man seeking redemption. In the weeks that followed the fall of Thompson Enterprises, an unprecedented media storm swept the country. The case, nicknamed by the press as the traffic light scandal, dominated headlines on every newspaper and TV newscast. Jack, Sarah, and Tommy found themselves at the center of a whirlwind of public attention. Reporters camped outside the building where they were staying under police protection, desperate for an exclusive statement. One morning, as they ate breakfast, Tommy pointed at the TV. "Look, Jack. That's us." On the screen, footage of Jack leaving the courthouse alternated with archive photos of Thompson Enterprises. The anchor spoke in a grave tone. Former CEO Jack Thompson gave new testimony today, detailing the corruption scheme that rocked the corporate world. But the real star of this incredible case continues to be young Tommy Miller, the homeless boy at a traffic light whose keen observations set the investigation in motion. Sarah turned off the TV, worried. Is it ever going to end? Tommy can hardly go out to play without being recognized. Jack sighed, understanding her concern. It'll die down eventually. But for now, we need to handle it as best we can. That afternoon, Jack had an interview scheduled with renowned journalist Elena Reyes. He knew it would be tough but necessary. In the studio, under bright lights, Jack sat down, trying to remain composed. "Mr. Thompson," Elena began, "the public is fascinated by this incredible story. A former CEO and a homeless boy bringing down a corporate empire. It sounds like a movie script. How did it really begin?" Jack took a deep breath. "It began with a chance encounter at a traffic light. I was at my lowest point, having just been kicked out of the company I built. And there was Tommy, a sharp kid who had heard things no one else noticed." "And did you immediately recognize the potential of his information?" Jack shook his head. "Not immediately. In fact, this story is as much about my redemption as it is about exposing corruption. I neglected my responsibilities for years, Elena. I let things happen under my nose without questioning." The journalist leaned in, intrigued. "So you're admitting some guilt in the scheme?" "I'm admitting I failed as a leader," Jack answered candidly. "I didn't participate directly in the corruption, but my negligence allowed it to flourish. And a good man, Tommy's father, lost his life because of it." The interview continued, with Jack detailing the investigation and always highlighting Tommy and Sarah's crucial role. He spoke of their nights combing through documents, the constant fear of being discovered, and the exhilarating moment when they finally gathered enough evidence. At the end, Elena asked the question on everyone's mind. "So what now, Mr. Thompson? What does the future hold for you, for Tommy, and for his mother?" Jack looked straight into the camera. "The future is uncertain, but one thing is clear. We'll keep fighting for justice and transparency in the corporate world. Tommy taught me that sometimes it takes a child's innocence to see truths adults ignore." In the days that followed, Jack's interview went viral. Clips were shared on social media, sparking heated debates about corporate ethics and responsibility. Tommy, for his part, became something of a folk hero. Kids around the country started paying closer attention to the world around them, inspired by his story. One afternoon, as they strolled through a park, quietly escorted by bodyguards, a group of children approached Tommy. "Is it really you?" one boy asked, eyes wide. "The kid who caught the bad guys." Tommy, shy at the sudden attention, nodded. "I just heard some stuff." Jack did most of the work. A girl in the group spoke up. "My dad said you're a hero, that you did something a lot of adults wouldn't." Sarah, watching the exchange, felt a mix of pride and worry. Her son had become a symbol of courage and integrity, but at what cost? Jack, noticing Sarah's concern, moved closer. "Everything okay?" "I'm not sure, Jack," she replied softly. "Sometimes I wonder if we did the right thing involving Tommy in all this." Jack placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Look at him, Sarah. He's inspiring other kids." What happened was terrible, but Tommy turned it into something positive. That evening, the three sat down for a quiet dinner, a rare moment amid the chaos of recent weeks. "Jack," Tommy asked, pushing his food around his plate, "are we famous now?" Jack exchanged a glance with Sarah before answering, "For now, yes. But fame isn't what's important, Tommy. What matters is the impact our actions had," Sarah added gently. "Your father would be so proud of you, sweetheart. Proud of all of us." A comfortable silence settled over the table, each person lost in their own thoughts. Outside, the media storm raged on. Experts debated the case's implications, politicians promised new anti-corruption laws, and the public remained captivated by the unlikely partnership that toppled a corporate giant. But there, in that small apartment, Jack, Sarah, and Tommy found a moment of peace. They knew challenges lay ahead, more testimonies, potential trials, but they also knew that together they could face anything. The story of the traffic light boy and the ex-CEO had captured the world's imagination. But for Jack, The real story was about redemption, courage, and the unexpected strength found in the most unlikely connections. The months following the scandal's exposure were a roller coaster of emotions and events for Jack, Sarah, and Tommy. Official investigations dug deeper, revealing layer upon layer of corruption that stretched far beyond Thompson Enterprises. Jack spent countless hours in testimonies, meetings with prosecutors, and investigative sessions. Each new detail emerging made him realize just how deeply ingrained the problem was in the corporate world. One afternoon, after a long day of questioning, Jack found Sarah and Tommy waiting for him outside the courthouse. Tommy's tired expression tugged at his heart. "Hey, champ," Jack said, ruffling the boy's hair. "How was school today?" Tommy shrugged. "Okay, I guess. Some kids still call me traffic light detective." Sarah sighed. "It's been hard on him, Jack, all this attention." In that moment, something clicked in Jack's mind. Although they were doing the right thing, the toll on Tommy and on so many other families hurt by corporate crime was huge. "I've got an idea," Jack said, a spark in his eyes. "What if we do more? Something to help people like you, who've been affected by all this corruption." Over the next few weeks, Jack worked tirelessly on a new project. Leveraging his contacts and some remaining resources, he established the New Beginnings Foundation. Its goal was simple: to support families of workers affected by corporate crimes, offering legal assistance, financial counseling, and opportunities for a fresh start. When Jack presented the idea to Sarah and Tommy, their reactions were immediate. "That's awesome, Jack!" Tommy exclaimed, his eyes gleaming with excitement. Sarah, meanwhile, looked touched. "You've really changed, haven't you?" she said softly. Jack felt a lump in his throat. "Thanks to both of you. Tommy showed me courage, and you, Sarah, taught me about resilience." The New Beginnings Foundation quickly gained momentum. Jack used his media visibility to promote the cause, and donations began pouring in from everywhere. One of the foundation's first projects was helping Sarah start her own business. She had always dreamed of opening a small bookstore cafe, a cozy space for people to gather and share stories. "I can't accept this, Jack," Sarah protested when he presented her with the proposal. "It's not charity, Sarah," Jack insisted. "It's an opportunity. And frankly, your cafe could be a great place for the foundation to hold some events." With the foundation's support and her own determination, Sarah turned an empty storefront into a charming bookstore cafe called Chapters and Aroma. It quickly became a beloved neighborhood spot. Seeing Sarah thrive in her new venture filled Jack with immense joy. He found himself visiting the cafe often, sometimes to work on foundation projects, other times just to chat with Sarah and watch Tommy do his homework in a cozy corner. As the months went by, the dynamic between the three of them changed subtly. Seeing Jack's genuine dedication, not just to the cause but to Sarah and Tommy, made Sarah gradually lower her guard. One evening, after closing the cafe, Sarah invited Jack to stay for dinner. While Tommy excitedly shared details of a school project, Jack noticed Sarah watching him with a softness in her eyes he hadn't seen before. Later, after Tommy was in bed, Sarah and Jack sat on the small balcony outside the apartment. "You know, Jack," Sarah began quietly, "there was a time I didn't trust you. I thought you were using us just to clear your conscience." Jack's heart clenched, but before he could reply, Sarah continued, "But now I see I was wrong. What you did, what you're doing with the foundation is real. You truly care." "I do care," Jack said, his voice thick with emotion, "about the cause, about all the families we're helping, and especially about you two." Something shifted between them then, an invisible barrier falling away as Sarah let herself see Jack not as the ex-CEO or a man seeking redemption, but simply as Jack, someone who had become an integral part of their lives. Over the following months, Jack became an even more constant presence in Tommy and Sarah's life. He helped Tommy with school projects, brainstormed business ideas with Sarah, and together they expanded the foundation's reach. The foundation grew, extending its services to other cities and even influencing policy changes in corporate law. Jack was invited to speak at universities and companies, sharing his story and advocating for greater transparency and ethics in business. At one of these talks, Jack surprised everyone by inviting Tommy to speak. The boy, now more confident, shared his unique perspective on the importance of paying attention and doing the right thing. "Sometimes grown-ups forget to notice little things," Tommy told the attentive audience, "but it's the little things that can make the biggest difference." Standing in ovation, Jack felt an overwhelming sense of pride and gratitude. Watching Tommy on stage and Sarah beaming in the front row, he realized he had found far more than redemption. He had found a new family and a new purpose. The scandal that had rocked the corporate world months ago was now the catalyst for positive changes. And at the heart of that transformation were three unlikely people: a former CEO seeking redemption, a resilient mother, and a brave boy who dared to pay attention. Together, they had not only exposed corruption, but were actively working to build a fairer, more ethical world. It was a new beginning, not just for them, but for everyone their actions and foundation could reach. Years had passed since that fateful morning at the traffic light. Autumn painted the city's trees in shades of gold and red, a reminder of passing time and the changes it brings. Jack Thompson strolled down the bustling streets, noticing how different everything felt. It wasn't just the falling leaves or the new buildings. It was the atmosphere, a sense of hope and integrity that seemed to permeate the financial district. He stopped in front of a sleek, modern building, its glass facade reflecting the bright sky. "New Beginnings Foundation," read the elegant letters above the entrance. Jack smiled, recalling how it had all started in a tiny rented office. Inside, the place buzzed with activity. Lawyers discussed pro bono cases, financial counselors advised families, and support groups gathered in welcoming rooms. The foundation had grown beyond Jack's wildest expectations, becoming a beacon of hope for those affected by corporate wrongdoing. "Mr. Thompson," called a young assistant. "Mrs. Miller called. She wants to confirm if you're still meeting at the cafe at 3 o'clock. Jack nodded, a warm feeling spreading through him at the thought of Sarah. "Yes, I'll be there. Thank you, Lisa." Exactly at 3, Jack walked into Chapters and Aroma. The scent of fresh coffee and new books enveloped him, accompanied by the welcoming hum of conversation and the gentle clink of cups. Sarah was behind the counter, strands of silver now streaking her hair, but her eyes still sparkled with the same resolve as ever. She smiled when she saw Jack, the kind of smile that still made his heart flutter. "Right on time," Sarah teased, handing him a cup of his favorite blend. Her bookstore cafe had become more than just a business. It was a community hub, a place where people came to exchange ideas, share stories, and form connections. Sarah herself had become a respected figure in the local business community, often invited to speak on ethical entrepreneurship and social responsibility. "Tommy should be here any minute," Sarah said, joining Jack at a corner table. "He's so excited about college." As if on cue, the door opened, and Tommy walked in. At 17, he was now tall and lanky, with the same observant eyes he'd had as a child. "Hey, Mom, Jack," he greeted them, hugging them both before sitting down. Jack looked at the young man with pride. Tommy had grown not just in stature, but also in wisdom and purpose. His experiences had shaped him, but they hadn't hardened him. "So," Jack began, "ready for the big change?" Tommy nodded, excitement shining in his eyes. "I can't wait. Central University's law program has an amazing focus on corporate law and business ethics." Sarah squeezed her son's hand. "Your dad would be so proud of you, honey." A comfortable silence fell over the trio, each lost in their own reflections. Finally, Tommy spoke. "I was thinking, before I leave for college, maybe we could visit Dad's grave. It's been a while since we've gone together." Jack and Sarah exchanged understanding looks. "Of course, Tommy," Jack replied. "That's a great idea." The next day, the three of them arrived at the cemetery. It was peaceful, the stillness broken only by an occasional bird call. Standing before John Miller's headstone, They paused. "Beloved husband, father, and silent hero," read the inscription. Sarah placed a bouquet of fresh flowers, her hands trembling slightly. Tommy stepped forward, touching the cold stone. "Hey, Dad," he said quietly. "A lot has changed since I was here last. I'm heading to law school soon, and I'm going to fight against the things you saw. I hope you're proud." Jack felt a lump in his throat and placed a supportive hand on Tommy's shoulder. Sarah wiped away a tear. "John always said the truth finds a way." He was right, wasn't he? In a way none of us ever imagined. Jack nodded, thinking back to the winding path that had brought them here. "A little boy at a traffic light," he murmured. "Who'd have thought that would change everything?" Tommy turned to Jack and his mom. "It wasn't just that, was it? It was Dad's courage to write it all down. It was you, Jack, deciding to listen to a homeless kid. It was Mom trusting us and standing by us." Sarah hugged her son, and Jack joined them. There, in front of John's grave, they were more than just individuals. They were a family, bound by extraordinary circumstances and a shared commitment to truth and justice. As they made their way back to the car, Jack reflected on how their lives had intertwined in ways he never could have foreseen. From a disgraced CEO to a devoted philanthropist, from a wary widow to a thriving entrepreneur, from a curious kid to a future lawyer determined to make a difference. "You know," Jack said, stopping for a moment, "I think we owe something to that place." Sarah and Tommy looked at him, puzzled. "The traffic light," Jack explained, "where it all started. Maybe we should visit it before Tommy leaves for college." Tommy smiled, his eyes dancing with nostalgia. "Can we ask the executives for spare change?" The three of them laughed, the solemn atmosphere of the cemetery lifting. The next day, they reunited at that same traffic light. The cars flowed by as usual. Executives hurried past with phones pressed to their ears. But for Jack, Sarah, and Tommy, this place held profound significance. "It seems smaller than I remember," Tommy said, looking around. Sarah hugged him. "You've grown, sweetheart, in every way." Jack watched them, a rush of emotion flooding through him. "You know, Tommy, you changed so many lives here, not just ours, but countless people helped by the foundation, by the new laws." Tommy nodded, his expression serious. "And now it's my turn to keep that work going." As the light turned green and the crowd around them began to move, the three of them lingered, bound together. It was a new dawn, not just for them, but for a society that had learned to value integrity and courage over profit at any cost. Jack looked at Sarah and Tommy, overwhelmed with gratitude. From a casual meeting at this very traffic light, they had built something extraordinary, a family, a mission, a legacy. And as they walked on together, leaving the traffic light behind, Jack knew that this was not an end, but a new beginning, one full of promise, challenges, and above all, hope. The story of the boy at the traffic light had become so much more, a symbol of how small acts of courage can, indeed, change the world.